minutes. So we'll begin, right? So good evening, everyone. First of all, I thank all of you on behalf of English Wizard for uh, joining the meeting. So this is basically the first session of the EONI series that English Wizards are planning. So to give an introduction on what exactly is EONI, this is a session where we will talk on topics related to English literature and language. So it's like the name suggests, EONI is everything on English. So the first session today is on probably the say hottest topic in the field in the academics now. Uh, NET exam, UGC NET exam, GATE exam, PhD entrances, and PhD. So today we have two excellent speakers with us who would uh, give you idea on all the three topics that I've mentioned before. So to begin with, I request Adina to introduce our speakers.
Am I audible?
Yes, you're perfect.
Okay, so today we begin our first session on EONI, that is everything on English. And before welcoming our speakers, I hope you guys have already watched our orientation class, a previous video, which was on UGC NET. It is available on YouTube as well as our app. So if you haven't watched that, I request you to, when you're free, to watch the video, which was an orientation video conducted by Gokul. So today's speakers are Gokul S and Dhananjay Rajendran. About Gokul S, he is a research scholar at Institute of English, and he cleared JRF in first attempt in 2017. I'm sure if you guys have watched the other video, the previous video, you are familiar with, you must be familiar with Gokul. He was the resource person for the previous video. And he also secured All India 804th rank in the civil service exam in 2019. So let's welcome Gokul S on behalf of each and every one of us. So the next speaker is Dhananjay Rajendran. Dhananjay Rajendran is currently an MPhil scholar at University of Calicut, and he did his MA in English Studies from IIT Madras. He is also a JRF holder, and he has secured the 4th rank in GATE 2021. So let's welcome both Gokul S and Dhananjay Rajendran. So over to you guys.
Thank you, Adina. Before that, I would like to give a idea on how exactly are we going to conduct the session. So initially, we'll have a briefing by both our speakers, and then we'll move on to the question and answer session where you can ask your questions. So even while they're briefing, you can definitely raise your questions. Two options. One is that you can unmute yourself and feel free to ask a question directly, or you can also type your question and post in the chat box. So this session, I think, would be conducted in a rather discussion format, which would be, I think that would be the best format we can do. So over to you, Dhananjay and Gokul.
Hello. Thanks, guys. Thanks, Adina and Gokul. So my task here is to, welcome to all of you who've joined us. Thanks for joining. And my task here is to give you a brief overview about these two exams, NET and the GATE. All right. So I'm sure most of you are familiar with NET to a degree because a lot of you are NET aspirants. Probably if you've written the exam before, right? So I'll still go over a few basics for the sake of clarity, right? So who can write NET? Anyone. So there's no age limit to write NET if you're trying to, become eligible for assistant professorship. But if you're trying to get a JRF, you'll need to be less than 31 years old as on date of the exam, date of the application. For this particular year, because we've lost 1 year because of COVID, and it's normally 30 years. So 30 years is the standard age limit. All right. And why should you write it? As I'm sure you're all familiar, NET gives you, it's like the name says, it's the national eligibility test, and it lets you become eligible for assistant professorship, first of all. right? And it can also substitute for other state level eligibility tests, right? Like SET and SLET. And if you qualify for JRF, you are also eligible to apply to premier institutions for their. So a lot of premier institutions require you to be a JRF scholar in order to apply. So that's there. And even otherwise, in any institution in India, like you can use your JRF to avail yourself of a very handy scholarship, right? Which it gives you a JRF for 2 years, and then after evaluating your performance, you can be eligible for an SRF or a senior research fellowship for the for 3 more years. So that's a rough idea of what JRF enables you to do, right? And so you are advised by UGC to write your NET exam in the area of your post graduation. And when at the time you apply for your PhD or your MPhil, your higher studies, you have some latitude to choose an area that's related to the area you did your masters in and did your NET in. So like there are a lot of areas which are similar to English, for example, since we're dealing with English mostly. So there are areas like performance art, folk culture. So a lot of areas which are like similar to English. So like according to the advice of the UGC, you are supposed to write your NET exam in English and then apply for courses that are on or related to the subject that you did your PG in, right? And well, so getting through this NET or JRF doesn't automatically qualify you to either become a prof or go and do your higher education, right? As you well know. So if you have if you're eligible for assistant professorship, you can go and apply to universities, and then they'll have different criteria, right? And maybe it depends on your marks that you scored in your PG, and so those are some criteria according to which you'll get selected or not. But this is a prerequisite in a lot of institutions right now, and it's going to become standardized. So if you're looking for a career in academia, you're well advised to do this exam, right? And if you have a JRF also, like Gokul will be talking in detail about PhD admission procedures. So there is an entrance. So there are 2 ways in which you can get get into a PhD program, right? One is through the entrance test, and then there is a JRF opening. Gokul will tell you in detail about these things, right? So the validity of your JRF is for 3 years. So your qualification for assistant professorship, that remains valid, but your JRF it's time bound. You need to start your higher education, your course, within 3 years of receiving the certificate, right? All right. So now I'll just move on to the pattern of the exam. So most of you must be familiar with it. You have 2 papers, and the first one is a common paper which all the people who write this exam have to write. So no matter what your subject is, you write a same paper. And then the second paper is your subject paper, and the pattern is like this. The first paper has 50 questions, and it's worth 100 marks. So each question carries 2 marks. And the second paper, it's got 100 questions, and it carries 200 marks in all. There are no negative marks. And so there's a video that Gokul has done. It's up on our YouTube channel, which gives you a good overview of this NET exam and the paper 2 in particular. And there he mentioned something. It's the paper 1 that actually can catapult your chances of that can catapult your NET score into a JRF earning score, right? So let's take, so usually a JRF cutoff would be around 58% for English, right? And usually if you have a good score in the paper, you're more likely to be catapulted into that level. one is very important, and the eligibility criteria is that you need 40% across both the papers, and you need to also get across the cutoff. So if you get like 90% or in paper one, that can really, or 80-85%, like that really have a big effect on your overall your final score and chances for eligibility, right? So there are 10 modules in paper one and 10 modules in paper two. And the difference is that in paper one, each of these modules carries 5 marks. Whereas in paper two, it varies. And like I mentioned, Gokul has got a video which goes into quite some detail about paper two and how traditionally they've given the weightage for each module, right? So I'll go into the different modules for paper one. Paper one, so the first module is teaching aptitude, right? Teaching aptitude is, so like I said, each module carries 5 marks, right? So, I mean, 5 questions worth 10 marks. So teaching aptitude is one of those modules which require mostly common sense and some light preparation, right? And the next one is research aptitude, which requires a moderate amount of familiarity with, and some preparation with the necessary material, right? The third one is comprehension, which requires practice more than anything else, right? Communication is again the next module, which also you can do with some amount of light preparation and mostly common sense. Then there are the 2 modules, mathematical reasoning and data interpretation, which both require some amount of preparation and some practice, right? That's one area where people usually falter, right? So that requires some preparation. Then there's logical reasoning, which is also some preparation, right? The next 3 areas are information and communication technology, people development and environment, and finally higher education system. So these 3 areas are areas from which there are questions, but which we normally find it difficult to place where these questions come from, right? We think, the first paper has so many random questions. How can I predict these where these questions come from? Actually, it's a matter of being very focused on your syllabus so that you know what exactly they're looking for. So if you you might have heard that there are there's some general knowledge questions in the paper one. So it's not necessarily general knowledge. It's very particularly questions about institutions, or it's questions about environment and pollutants, impact of pollutants. So these points are given in a lot of detail in the syllabus for paper one, which you have to really be familiar with, so that you don't devote your preparation to unnecessary stuff, right? So moving on to paper two, like I mentioned, so before to the whole paper, the whole exam is 3 hours long, and you can choose how you divide your time, right? So normally, English, you don't really require too much time paper. You answer, you do, right? So you have enough time to paper one and then move on to paper two, right? And paper two,
Dhananjay, I think there is some issue with the voice. Or is it just me?
What about now?
No, there is an issue with the voice. I think what we can do is, see, I think a couple of people have already raised their hands. So what we could do is, we could take questions as and when they come, right? It would be better, since there is also an issue with
I think it's an issue with connection rather than this. I think it's an issue with connection. If you could do something on that. I think we've lost Dhananjay. I I think Google can take
Yeah,
this from
I'll
now
take
for a while.
probably you can just call up Dhananjay and check what's happened.
Yeah, I'll do that. Can you continue with this? So,
Yeah,
also,
yeah.
if you could keep your microphone a bit more closer to your mouth. Yeah, perfect.
Okay.
Yeah,
I
thank
think
you.
Dhananjay is back.
I think there are still issues
Hello,
with
am I audible?
connection. Yes, Dhananjay, I think what you can do is you can turn off your video so that,
Yeah, that
right?
would work probably.
I think that would work.
Turned off my video.
Yeah. Dhananjay has left the meeting. I think Google can continue from here for a while.
What you can do is, but what we'll do is, we'll just take over and we'll take the conversation forward, and one of you can just call Dhananjay and check.
I will do that. I'll do that. You can continue with it.
Okay. Generally what he was saying is, we were talking about paper 2. Yeah, first off, let me just lay some ground rules. Ground rules in the sense, you can, this is going to be a free flowing conversation. There is no such thing as a speaker, then what else? The people, listeners, nothing like that. You can put your questions in the chat box. You can raise your hands. We'll note it down and we'll get back to you. Or you can just unmute and ask. I would say, okay, I can try to be louder. I think it's overall issues with connection. Am I audible now?
You are. Yep.
Okay.
Better.
Okay.
I think it's an issue with microphone. If you could keep it a bit more closer, or if you could move a bit forward. You're using headset, right? So I
Yeah, I'm
think
using headset. Is it all right now?
I think better.
Okay. Okay.
Yep.
What we'll do is, let's make this a free flowing conversation. Anyone can put your questions across, and more importantly, if there is something that you want to add to what we are saying, if there is some hack or something that you want to add, you can do that as well. That is a way in which we'd like to take this conversation forward. So first of all, the what to add to what Dhananjay was saying, see, paper 2 is a paper where it is a bit difficult to score marks as far as English literature is concerned, because um, number one, it's a vast area. You don't know where the questions are going to come from. Again, I won't elaborate on it because you already have that video there. I would like you to check that out. I'm not promoting myself, but you could get something out of it. So generally, I think Dhananjay would also have talked about the GATE exam. GATE exam is very recently instituted, and one of you were asking, what is the importance of writing GATE exam? See, GATE exam is an exam that gives you a access into some of the topmost institutes of the country. For example, if you look at Madras IIT, there is a course on humanities where there is both PG and PhD, where English literature students can also join. Then IIT Kharagpur, IIT Roorkee, I think several IITs have courses on humanities. Then again, you have courses in NIT, you have courses in IISER, you have courses in IIST. These places, there are courses which, let's say, humanity. Okay, the question, I'll come to the question, but yeah, it opens your gateway into these institutions of national importance. Now, if you are qualified in JRF, you don't need to give GATE exam, because JRF qualification means you are already there in the top. GATE is just an additional exam or qualification. They have instituted GATE probably because all other sectors such as engineering, uh, all of them have GATE. So they thought, why not? Let's give GATE to humanities as well, so that they get parity. If you have a JRF, there is no need for GATE exam. You can write GATE exam and you can flaunt it. You can say that, okay, I have JRF, I have GATE, so I'm wonderful, I'm great, I'm beautiful. That is good. But there is no particular benefit that you'll derive. because JRF already gives you what? I think Dhananjay left out the amount. This will be a huge motivation for you. JRF will give you 31,000 scholarship per month. Then additionally, it will also give you house rent allowance based on your city. And once you convert to SRF, this will increase. So this is a huge amount. This is a handsome amount, and GATE will not add anything to it. But if you don't have net, you don't have JRF. If you don't have net, GATE qualification will let you apply in several IITs. Central universities. Central universities. So central universities right now, GATE is very recent. Rules are not very firmly framed. I don't think central universities have taken up GATE as a qualification. Mostly IITs and NITs have taken up. Eventually, central universities will, because this is a centrally, exam which is recognized by the central government, by the Human Resource Development Ministry. So central universities will eventually consider GATE as a qualification. Now, SRF means Senior Research Fellowship, which means that once you do 2 years of research as a JRF student, you will be made to do a presentation of what you've so far done, based on which they will convert your scholarship into an SRF one. So that is it about NET and GATE. And if we start talking about your PhD, you are doing your PhD, I mean a PG, you need to start your NET preparation. See, PG syllabus of many universities are very similar to NET syllabus. So number one thing is to have a good grasp of your syllabus, have a good idea of your syllabus. Number two is to understand how NET works. For that, you can just check out previous year question papers. You can start doing those question papers. Number three is to contact English Research, because they are offering many useful courses for your NET preparation. Again, I'm not advertising English Research, but because I know them. Then generally, when you do your PG syllabus corresponds with your NET. So I would advise you to prepare in parallel. And in fact, you can start writing your NET exam in your very first semester. I gave my NET exam in my very first semester, and I cleared my NET and JRF. So you can give your NET exam from your very first semester, which means that while you are doing your PG, you get 4 attempts and try to clear one of those. Preparation, see, what you can do is have a good grasp of what you are learning in your college. And number 2, understand the pattern of NET, work out previous year question papers, read a good English literature language history, something like Edward Albert or Arthur Compton Ricketts. Read it, understand it, make it thorough. And also look into other literature such as American literature, then Caribbean literatures, cultural studies. Try to look into these as well. So we were talking about PhD. If you want to join research, either MPhil or PhD, different universities offer different mechanisms. One way is to clear NET and join an institution. Some institutions like University of Hyderabad requires that you hold a JRF. Other institutions like University of Kerala, University of Calicut require that if you have a NET, you don't need to have any other qualification. You just need to present your synopsis and you can join in case they approve your synopsis. Number 3, another mechanism is most of the universities conduct PhD entrance exams. For example, if you look at Kerala University or University of Calicut or University of Kannur, they conduct PhD entrance exams. You can clear those and you can join. But if you look at University of Hyderabad or JNU, if you look at universities like uh, University of Hyderabad or JNU, even if you have a NET, you will have to clear their entrance. Even if you have JRF, you will have to clear their entrance, and they will take the mark of the entrance and give you an additional thing because you have NET. Give you another additional thing if since you have JRF, and then they'll also conduct an interview board. They'll take that mark as well, and then they'll come up with a list. So that is how you get admission to a PhD course. Now we'll talk about research, choosing a topic and all. We'll come to that. But before that, there's an interesting question. What is the status of an MPhil exam? I mean MPhil course, Jay Prakash, right? Yeah. So there's what is the status of MPhil? MPhil has been, I won't say MPhil has been scrapped because you cannot scrap MPhil. Scrapping MPhil is something that is to be done by different universities, not the central government. But according to National Education Policy 2020, they say that MPhil is no longer important, which means that in any competitive exam, in any research, in any interview board that you face, MPhil will not be important. You will not be given grace marks for MPhil. They will not consider MPhil as a qualification any longer for anything. For example, earlier, if you had MPhil in interview boards, when you go for assistant professorship, they used to give you a grace mark for MPhil, but that will no longer be available. But many universities still continue MPhil as a course, which they can do. And the thing is, MPhil, the issue with MPhil is you will be asking whether it is useful or not right now. See, MPhil has its uses because it helps you step into research culture. It helps you step into academia because up to your PG, you are not researching much, especially in most of the Indian universities. But after your PG, you need to step into that academic culture, which MPhil offers an opportunity. That is the most important purpose of MPhil right now. Its status is that, okay, many universities continue it, but even so, if you can get directly into a PhD, I won't advise MPhil as an option. That is what I would say.
Gokul bro, can I interrupt for a sec?
Yeah, okay.
I think it would be interesting to listen on this question from Dhananjay because he is doing it. So probably he can give a clear picture on what exactly is happening.
You are one, and Adina is.
I think we should leave that to Dhananjay.
Yeah. Okay. Okay.
All right. Thanks, Gokul. So I hope you can hear me now. Am I audible?
Perfect.
All right. Okay. So the reason I decided to join an MPhil is because I need, as Gokul mentioned, I had a gap after my PG, and I needed to get back to, the ways of doing research, right? And doing a PhD is a pretty big commitment. So once you join, so it's a 5-year commitment at a good university, right? And you need to be sure if you really want to, if you're committed to doing it, right? So this was for me a way to gauge whether I am going to, stay on that course in the long run, right? So that's why I did an MPhil. I'm doing an MPhil, and like Gokul said, yes, the status of an MPhil, that's a different issue for me. So it's it still gives you research experience, which I consider important, which is why I did it. So I have a couple of things.
There is a pragmatic thing,
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, usually what happens is when you directly go for a PhD, I have experience in this. I went for a PhD directly. What happens is you don't get guides. They are not ready to take you because they don't know you. But when you are doing your MPhil, if you are doing it in your department, in the mother department of a university, you get to familiarize with all the teachers. We say we get a chance to കുറച്ച് മണി അടിക്കാനൊക്കെ ഉള്ള chance കിട്ടും. and eventually yeah, that is important because you have to get into academia.
All right. So to continue, so Jayaprakash has asked another question. If you complete MPhil in 2 years, can they finish their PhD? The JNU offers an MPhil which can lead on to a PhD. So once you complete an MPhil, you can go on and join their PhD program, right? Without like doing the PhD entrance separately. So some institutes offer you the option to continue, provided you meet the necessary qualifications once you complete your MPhil and go on to do a PhD program.
And there is something.
So you don't need to write the entrance test again.
Okay.
I'd also like to. All right. So I'd also like to address this question about why do you give GATE if you've qualified JRF? Because like I did write the exam, right? So for me personally, so GATE, IIT Bombay for their PhD program, they consider the GATE results, GATE scores. So like Gokul mentioned, there are two ways of getting into a PhD are: one, you write a PhD entrance exam, and two, there is JRF entry, right? But so what I experienced last year when I tried to when I attended the JNU's PhD process was I wrote the entrance test, because so when I write the entrance test, they the test carries 70% of the weightage and 30% was the interview, and the JRF entry did not require me to write the entrance test, but your entrance would ride on whether you gave a good synopsis and interview, right? So I was more comfortable with doing this entrance test, and I mean leaving only 30% to the. So that's one reason I went that route. So similarly in IIT Bombay, they have this GATE which carries a 70% weightage at least, and then the rest of it is up to whatever criteria they're devising. And another thing about GATE is that it's a relatively new exam, and not so IIT Bombay is the one institute that's primarily already mentioned that they are going to consider GATE GATE as an entrance exam for their PhD, right? So more institutes can be expected to follow suit. They may or may not. It's a very different exam from NET, right? They're not similar. This is more on the lines of a GRE or an LSAT exam, right? So and the questions differ like that. We can probably do that, talk about GATE separately in detail. So let's go back to the, whatever we were doing before this.
One of the things, the interesting thing about an MPhil exam, MPhil course that I wanted to mention, I think some of you won't know this. If you have a JRF and you are at the brink of your validity, when you join your MPhil course, you can avail JRF and your validity won't be lost. And afterwards, once you complete your MPhil course, you can avail the rest of it while you are doing your PhD research. So if you are facing an issue with the validity of your JRF, one of the things you could look at is joining the MPhil course. So I think we could a couple of questions we have addressed. So I think there might be other questions that people want to get addressed.
Google Bro, see, we've collected a few questions from the Google form. I think Adina would read that out. But before that, I would like to bring clarity to something else. Okay. We've talked about MPhil, JRF, etc. basically on research. So I have a question on how exactly should we proceed to PhD. We need a topic, we need a pakka synopsis, we need things like that. How exactly would we approach this thing, keeping in mind about the topic, its relevance, etc.? Hope you got the question.
See, Dhananjay,
Also, if you could be a bit more louder, it would be great. If you could keep the microphone a bit more closer.
okay, I think it's an issue with the microphone probably. Um, um, like Dhananjay mentioned something very important. You know, PhD is a huge commitment. It is a commitment that you are taking up for at least 5-6 years, and it could go for 8-9 years in some cases. So the issue is that when you do something like that, you need to have an interest, uh, because hello, am I audible?
Yes, go.
Yeah, you're audible.
Okay. So the thing is, when you do your PhD, when you take up a topic, what happens is, uh, you need to have a sustained interest, because you need to do your research for like minimum of 5-6 years, and you need to give a lot of your personal time. Need to give a lot of you need to put a lot of effort into it. So as a result, unless you have a topic that you are genuinely interested in, research would not be possible. You will feel like leaving it in the middle. uh, at the same time, the topic has to be something relevant. Topic has to be something. See, what is happening today in the academia is they are not looking for topics which are stale. They're not looking for topics which have no connection with the real world. They're not looking for topics which are merely gross readings of textbooks. For example, a feminist reading of blah blah blah, a Marxist reading of this and that. That they are no longer looking for. If you want to have a sure shot in getting into research, you need to have a topic which is dynamic. You need to have a topic which captures the interest of not just your guide, but also of the people who are there to listen to your uh, synopsis. Someone has raised the hand. If it is related to your related to research, you can unmute and ask, or you can type in the question. Is there any question?
I think now Adina can read out the questions that we have collected.
Okay.
So, like Gokul said, we've received some questions from some participants. Actually, almost all of the questions are already been asked by some participants here, and but I have some doubts myself.
Okay.
One is regarding GATE exam. So you were talking about GATE exam, its relevance, and all of those things. So how important is this exam for people who are trying to get into universities other than IITs? For instance, universities in Kerala. How important is clearing GATE or securing a good score in GATE, considering Kerala universities?
So the thing is, GATE hasn't been accepted by. It's a new examination, and only IIT Bombay currently has said that they consider GATE scores for admission to their PhD programs. So the rest of it, the qualification to write the exam, that like you can be on your final year of your bachelor's or whatever, and like it can be used to apply for both masters and doctoral programs. It's something to do with the structure of the exam, which caters to a lot of different disciplines. So for a BTech person, that's relevant, right? So if you want to do a PhD, you directly write your GATE exam, or even if you want to do your masters, you write this exam. So the misunderstanding we have is when it carries over to humanities. Currently, it's IIT Bombay. Uh, in future, perhaps other colleges might accept GATE, but I mean, personally for me, it was I wrote it as an entrance exam to IIT Bombay's. I mean, yeah, to start off an entrance process for IIT Bombay's PhD program, right? There will be other steps like we mentioned.
Okay, can I?
Huh?
Okay. So what I think is, the issue is that we have this national education policy which talks about multiple entry, multiple exit in degree and PG programs. GATE is something that caters to that kind of a structure. As of now, yeah, like Dhananjay was saying, as of now, IIT Bombay is the only university. But I think soon IIT Madras, the IIT Madras and other IITs and NITs will soon probably accept this thing. But talking about universities in Kerala and all, they will eventually come on board because they will have to. Once NEP really gets implemented, really starts implementing, GATE will have its importance. And also, when premier institutions accept a practice, the rest of the universities are forced to follow. So eventually, right now, GATE might not be that significant in terms of people who are looking to join University of Kerala or Calicut, but eventually it will be. That is what I believe. I think we have.
Thank you, Gokul and Dhananjay.
In chat box, Dhananjay would probably.
So is the question, through GATE, can a person get a scholarship in PhD like JRF? Yes. So if you qualify GATE and if you get admitted to a PhD program through GATE, there is a scholarship which people in other engineering disciplines already use. So there is a similar scholarship, but that's not the primary. Other than IIT Bombay, which has now accepted GATE, so the other way you can use your GATE score is probably it's like so when you apply for jobs. So GATE is a test that's recognized by whether it be companies or whatever, for its quality, right? So you know that there is a certain quality of the exam. So it can this is speculation because it's not like set in stone, but it can help to give you some credibility. Other than if you're, so I wouldn't recommend doing this unless you're trying to join a PhD program, right? Specifically right now in IIT Bombay, but otherwise it can give you credibility, and it's a very different exam from NET. So we need to talk about that and discuss in detail.
Dhananjay, just for clarity,
not
if I
along
may.
with this, I feel.
So JRF is a scholarship exam, while GATE is only an entrance exam.
GATE is primarily an entrance exam, but you get a scholarship when you enter through
the scholarship
GATE.
Amount is different. JRF has
it is different.
a huge amount compared to GATE. But see, thing is, I would tell everyone, write the GATE exam for the fun it is. Enjoy writing this, because it gives you
the drawback is that the per paper it costs 1,500 for if you don't have any concessions, if you're a female student, or if you have if you belong to other categories, you can write one paper for 750 rupees. So it's comparatively more expensive, but it's a totally different examination, and its relevance will become more prominent in the coming years when more institutes, like Gokul said, accept it.
I think we have more questions.
No, it's not 12,500, it's 1,500. Oh, the scholarship you mean? All right, I'm not sure.
We have more questions coming in. Gokul Krishnan, you are not audible.
Am I audible now? Okay. Talking about the fun of it, I have a question here. If you have not addressed this before in detail. So while writing the last GATE exam, I found the MSQ sections questions a bit more difficult than how exactly we used to answer the MCQ questions in NET exam. So this question is to Dhananjay, who has cleared GATE top marks. So how exactly should we approach an MSQ question in comparison with the approach MCQ question? Because you stand a chance to get the negative marks also, right? If I'm not wrong.
So you're right, Gokul. So an MSQ question is it's a prominent feature in the GATE exam, but it's also there in some other entrance exams like JNU's, if I remember right. I'm not entirely sure.
Dhananjay,
yeah, Gokul.
If you could also explain what exactly is an MSQ question, all right. Because people. Yeah.
Okay. So an MSQ question is a multiple selection question, right? So like we have multiple choice, there's also a category of questions called MSQ, one or more options. So suppose there's a question, which are the following states have only land boundaries, and they give you 4 states. So maybe 2 of them have land boundary, only land boundaries, right? So your answer will be A and B. It's not actually the option corresponding to A and B. It's not going to be just A or just B, right? So that's how a multiple selection question looks. And it's I found a lot of MSQ questions, especially in the uh, uh, they have the GATE paper has a lot of questions that test your logical reasoning and your ability to actually apply your knowledge, right? So for example, say you know a theory. So the options in the question will be potential applications or potential implications of the theory, right? So you need to be able to pick out which of these are actually implications of the theory. So that's one way in which an MSQ question can be asked. So answering an MSQ question, like Gokul mentioned, is slightly difficult because if you if you in GATE, if you get an MSQ question wrong, there is no negative marks, right? If you get an MCQ question wrong, there's a negative mark. So if it's a 1 mark question, you get negative 1/3. If it's a 2 mark question, you get negative 2/3. But if you get an MSQ question wrong, you don't get any negative marks. And you don't get any marks for partial answers, obviously, right? So the thing is, that structure incentivizes you to answer the question whether you're completely sure or not. You get to eliminate the options which you're sure that do not fit in with the answer, right? So what I follow is I eliminate answers, eliminate options which I'm very sure are not the answer to the question, and then with the rest, Gokul has also talked about intelligent guessing. So that's really what we use in an MSQ, because this is also a format that's very common in civil service exam,
Yeah,
right? So
UPSC
civil service exam
also
has a lot of MSQ questions.
Yeah.
Yeah, so
And
we
there are
carry over the
multiple
same
questions.
technique of intelligent guessing here to write the MSQ, answer the MSQ questions. And you have to
So
keep in mind that
does
there are no negative marks for those.
The thing is, no, in GATE exam there is no negative marks, but UPSC has negative marks. And one thing that Gokul has asked, how do we address this? How do we solve the problem of MSQ? The only way I think is to write practice, practice, practice. Get as many MSQ questions as you can. Try to guess intelligently. Try to eliminate. Try to make that art of elimination perfect, and it's very likely that you will be able to answer those. The fact that
To add
you
what Gokul
know,
said,
Dhananjay, you're not audible.
an MSQ, it tests your knowledge of a particular topic in some detail.
please.
Hello, am I audible?
Yeah, go ahead.
Hello?
Yeah, you are
Hello?
audible. You are
Yes, yes,
Okay,
yes.
so an MSQ tests your knowledge of a particular topic in some detail, right? Like I mentioned earlier, the preparation for an exam like GATE is slightly different from an exam like NET, because NET requires you to look at an extensive area in not much detail. You can go over the important topics and have a superficial level of knowledge. But for a GATE exam, you need to be much more thorough with your concepts.
Guys, if I may,
Okay.
there's this question.
Okay.
So there are a lot of questions coming in the chat box. So one of the questions is there any drawbacks in, are there any drawbacks in undertaking PhD from technical universities as they come under AICTE?
Okay, I would like to address this. This is something I wanted to tell you people. Number one, the drawback is primarily not due to the fact that it comes under AICTE. Because if you have a PhD from, say, IIST, it will be accepted anywhere. If you have a PhD from IISER, it will be accepted anywhere. But there are certain other drawbacks. Yeah, the issue with AICTE and UGC is that these organizations are at loggerheads with each other. They are in conflict. So one day UGC might say that, okay, AICTE PhDs, we will not take. That is a possibility, but that is right now, that is not an issue. But you need to be careful about that as well. But the issue, more important issue is, even when you talk about an institution like IIT, the biggest drawback while you do your PhD there is that you have no connections. Say, for example, you do your PhD in University of Kerala, Institute of English, or from University of Hyderabad. You are connected to many other people of your academia. You are connected to people from different English departments across the country. And these connections will help you to figure out new areas, establish new relationships, uh, go and do your papers in different universities, and eventually when you come out, you have a huge credibility. But if you do your PhD from IIT Madras, you do your PhD from IIT Bombay, the you, humanities department there is comparatively small. English is just one.
Gokul,
Okay.
can I interject? Because
Okay.
I studied there.
Okay. Okay.
So I don't really agree with what you said, right? Because
Okay. Okay.
IITs have really good humanities departments.
Okay.
And speaking of IIT Madras, there is an academic conference that's annually conducted where a lot of people from a lot of universities across the country come in, and people are encouraged to go to different universities and present papers as well. They're also encouraged to apply for scholarships like the what do you call it, the Fulbright scholarship,
Yeah.
for example, and go to foreign countries. So I don't think that networking is such a big no for people who do their PhDs in IITs. And I also have a lot of there are a lot of the humanities departments in IIT, in different IITs, which have people who I really think are exciting to work with. So I wouldn't discourage
Yeah,
humanities departments of
personally,
IITs.
yeah, I wouldn't discourage, because the very fact that you are from an IIT, that tag is very important. The tag is huge. But personally, people have told me this, and that is why I actually dropped IIT Madras, uh, because number one thing is, when if you are in Kerala, for example, if you want to get into an institution as an assistant professor, thing is you need to have a foothold in here. You need to know people here. When I, for example, work here in Institute of English, if I go to face an interview board, it is very likely that any person, all the people in that board, I will be already familiar with. They will know me, and they will know what I can bring to the table already. Which IIT, again, there is another thing. IITs are different. IITs are huge. They are different. But then there are institutions like ISIS, IISTs, NITs. Even NITs have English departments, humanities departments, which are not very excitable.
So I would personally encourage applicants to look at the departments, look at the profs, and see
Yeah,
if they
so
really
yeah,
match the area you're really looking for,
again, that is
right?
important. If you are doing cross-disciplinary research, if you are working on say uh, quantum physics in fiction, just coming up with something, you would likely do better in an IIT, because you'll get to do cross-disciplinary, cross-departmental research, which is very nascent in any other university, including University of Hyderabad and JNU.
Even if you're not really into science.
Yeah.
So, like I mentioned about the college I studied in, IIT Madras, it's got a new memory studies conference,
Yeah.
and that's an exciting area that's developing there. So, I'm sure that like there are advantages to trying to go there, but it's also, yeah. I would definitely encourage people to apply to it should the department interest you, because there are some IITs which don't have the people that you might be looking for. Some IITs which don't give importance to their humanities departments. So from what I know, IIT Delhi, IIT Bombay, IIT Madras, they have fairly large humanities departments.
IIT Bombay
About the other IITs, I'm not that sure. They have fairly limited humanities departments, or which focus on very, limited number of disciplines.
Yeah, one thing I have experience with it, I think, with is, I think IIT if I'm not wrong, IIT Kharagpur, the criteria they put forward when I went for their PhD thing is that you need to do research in Indian English literature only. Then only we can take you, which is, you know.
No, that's true. IIT Kharagpur has a very limited humanities department.
So I think it depends on the university, the department, and your choice of area.
Of course.
So I think we have other questions to address. So
Exactly.
am I audible?
Yeah. Now you are.
Yeah, you are.
Okay. So can we move to the other questions we have? Hello?
Sure,
Yeah,
sure,
go
sure.
on, go on.
Yeah, okay. So one of the questions is, what is the procedure for PG admissions after securing GATE?
PG admissions. I don't think for the humanities, so this paper is called XHC2, the one you're writing for English. So I don't think a lot of institutes for their for PG courses are considering this
Yeah, procedures
GATE
have
exam.
not been established, I suppose.
So it's a for our purposes, it's a PhD entrance exam to IIT Bombay right now, and it might encompass more universities later. It's also a credible exam because it's I mean it's done by credible university, and it's a very good paper. Personally, I feel.
Yeah, thing is, see, right now, don't be discouraged to take the GATE exam, because see, right now you may not have a procedure established but I do believe maybe within the next 1 or 2 years, probably by June 2022, institutions will have established mechanisms to take in people based on for PG as well, based on GATE.
All right. So other than GATE exam, how to approach a PG entrance exam for IIT? I mean, what is the procedure?
Generally speaking, see, different universities have different things. For example, here in University of Kerala, Institute of English Department, Mother Department.
No, Gokul, I was talking about IIT specifically.
IITs.
Maybe Dhananjay could.
Oh, okay.
Each IIT has a different course, so it's not as if all IITs have uniform course structures. So IIT Madras has an integrated PG program for the humanities department. So I joined right after my 12th. There was an entrance exam, and that structure isn't there in a lot of the UG or PG portion is not there in a lot of IITs. There are some IITs that offer MSCs or things like that, but they have their own entrance exams. It's not from an exam like GATE, or it's not from a common exam, but it's from entrance exams that the university.
Yeah. All right. We have one more question.
One second.
Okay, sure.
Dhananjay, what I wanted to know was some of the IITs offer integrated PhD programs, right? Which encompasses both a master's and PhD. Do we have those for humanities, English? And if we do, how do we get into those?
So right now, from what I know, integrated PhD programs are more in engineering courses. Okay. So it's not a thing for like humanities. And I'm not aware of any IIT that offers an integrated PhD that starts from the PG level. Okay. Because there's a huge gap, like you mentioned earlier, right, between the PG level and the PhD level.
Yeah.
Okay. Another question. I think we should pretty much go really fast, considering it's already been more than an hour. Yeah. So another question is, sir, will it be wise enough to leave questions in GATE exam as there is negative marking?
I wouldn't. So there are 1 mark questions with negative marks. There are 2 mark questions with negative marks. So when you look at the questions, you really need to consider whether you're totally at sea. So for 2 mark questions, and if you're totally unfamiliar with it, it might be wise. But I usually try to answer as many questions as I can, because the incentive of answering the questions is greater than the the setback you get when your
I think the
guess
important point
goes
is,
wrong.
unlike net exam, gate, your score does matter. In net exam, you just need to clear the exam, where you can leave out questions. But in gate exam, you need to have a good score. You need to have a top rank. Therefore, I think, yeah, it's the incentive is more for answering rather than leading.
Okay, another question we have is what are the some interesting papers you've come across? So, kind of off topic, but if you could answer in very short
Interesting
papers,
as in
research papers probably.
research papers.
Yeah, if you could keep the answer really short and
Yeah, we have come across. Yeah, I remember something on Australian koalas, which was done in an English literature seminar a couple of weeks back. They were talking about Australian koalas. Then I remember last year we had a paper on Sri Chakra in a conference on ideas and ideologies. Yeah, people do all kinds of papers. I once went and did a paper on sledging that is related to cricket in a seminar related to Australian studies. So yeah, people do all kinds of things. Really, you could do anything if you are doing the interesting thing about doing research in English literature is anything that you can think of, you can take up and do a research paper, you could connect football and globalization and do a research paper on that. You could even do a PhD on that.
okay, thank you, Gokul. So, should we move on to the questions we have?
Yes.
We've received beforehand, or
are there other questions which are significant?
yeah, if anyone else has any questions, now is the time you speak or type in your questions, I think.
If the questions are kind of repeating ones, then I think we don't need to answer that. But since you talked about papers, I would like to bring in clarity to something from your side. So I think it is very important to talk about paper presentation, paper publication, because I think most of our listeners are PG students. So I think it's high time to start thinking about papers. So if Google could, or Dhananjay could bring in some clarity on that regarding how exactly should we approach a paper presentation, meaning international seminars and national seminars, etc. Now definitely webinars, and also regarding the journals, UGC careless. So there is this whole lot of uncertainty in this field, especially after the introduction of UGC careless, right? So if you could bring in ideas on that.
Although I would highly recommend you to keep it short.
Okay. Shall I or should will Dhananjay?
Can Gokul takes up?
Okay. So thing is, a paper presentation is important because paper presentation increases your credibility. Even when you do your PG, even when you do your degree, you can start presenting papers. And like I said, you can do it on anything. If you just start networking, you'll get hundreds of brochures. Now, since it's gone online, there is a proliferation of meetings, webinars. Just try doing something. Talking about paper publications, UGC care list. Thing is, care list. See, when you publish a paper, if you want to have credibility, you will have to look at two things. Number one, you should be publishing in a journal which has an ISBN number, which shows acceptability. Number two, if you want to get UGC recognition, if you want to be considered while as part of your PhD work, or while you go for some interview, if you want to be considered your paper, you want your paper to be considered, then you will have to publish in a journal which is in the UGC care list. UGC care list is available online. You can just download it and see which are the journals that are available in care list, which are the publications which are available in care list, and you can try sending your papers to those publications. They will have their own criteria. But the issue is sometimes UGC randomly removes some journal from some publication from the care list. They reinstate it. These are issues which we cannot do anything really. We cannot do anything about those. But credible journals UGC don't remove. UGC does not usually remove those journals with credibility and which has a long history of working. So when you are trying to publish a paper, try to publish in one of those journals which has both ISBN number and which is included in the UGC care list and which has credibility, which is peer reviewed. Peer reviewing is important. You have to be sure that peer review. You have to look at if it is peer reviewed, factor of what we call hit percentage. How much is its circulation? Those things you have to look at. I think this is something to be taken up in much detail. We don't have the time to do that.
I think we should do a whole session on that.
We could probably.
Also, another question we have is how to write a research proposal. Again, we could do a whole session on that.
Again, but simply.
But a few words.
Yeah, few words. I would say first thing is identify a topic, do sufficient research, dig deeply into it, identify the problem with it, identify the research area which has not been sufficiently explored. See, actually, the structure of a research proposal is simple enough. You need to give an introduction, you need to give an overview, background, etc. Then you need to put your hypothesis and objectives across. Then you will have to define your methodology, what you are doing, how you are doing it, which theories you are taking up. Are you taking up statistical methods? Are you taking up surveys, etc., etc.? Then you will have to elaborate on your the further scope, conclusion. The structure is easy enough, but the important thing is to identify an important, the useful topic which will be interesting, topic which can make an impact, and topic which will be accepted by the board that is evaluating you.
Okay, so Dhananjay, do you have something to?
No, for the purposes of in today's discussion, I think Gokul's mentioned the important considerations.
Sure. Okay. So should we go on to the questions we have beforehand, or most of the questions are repeated? So I'll just
answered most of them.
Yeah, most of the questions are answered. So I'll just address a few questions which you might have missed out on. So one question is that, is NET and GATE syllabus the same, considering that GATE could also be written by BA students?
So I think it's a misconception to judge the difficulty level of GATE by the qualification required to write it. So like I mentioned, it has in mind BTech students who want to do a master's or a PhD, right? So it's not the same for us, but they've copied the same qualification. So the GATE exam essentially requires you to have some in-depth knowledge of it requires, like they've mentioned, four types of things they want. They want recall, they want comprehension, they want application, and they want synthesis and analysis. So that's the philosophy behind their papers. So it's not a very superficial paper, but it's also not as vast in area as the NET paper. So there's a syllabus which, if you read, you'll be able to pick out which areas are more important. For example, they stress on the literature of the long 19th and 20th century. So that will limit the portions you have to deal with, right? But they also focus on some areas like literature from the Indian subcontinent, not just India, but also from Sri Lanka, Pakistan, Bangladesh, etc. Right? So that's not an area that we have that much focus on in the NET syllabus. So there are differences. So you can't approach them the same way. The way is to look at the syllabus and be very thorough about the syllabus.
All right. Thank you, Dhananjay. Over to Gokul Krishnan. I think it's time we...
Yeah, it's been too long.
Yes.
Yes. So we are reaching the conclusion of this more than 1.5 hour session. I think most of the questions are asked.
Yeah, we have answered most of the questions. I think people have a lot of questions. People could, get into English Wizards Instagram page, post their questions, probably message
Yeah,
you.
definitely.
And
Also, I think see, since most of the questions are answered, but still there are sessions, I mean, areas where we can go on talking about, and we could conduct separate sessions, especially on say writing a research paper regarding papers and publications.
PhD
These
topics.
are the areas I think where people need a lot of clarity. So to conclude, I would like to thank Gokulas and Dhananjay for spending more than 1.5 hours with us. I thank all the participants for spending more than 1.5 hours with us. We've had a very productive session. So I personally look forward to more sessions in the future. So again, to conclude, I thank all of you on behalf of English Research. And yeah, thank you. Have a great evening. Bye. Thank you, Gokul and Dhananjay. Thank you, everyone here. Thank you, Adina.